Okay, we're back on it, back at it. We're going to go over some stuff today and see if we can learn something. Back to the cycle of addiction and really sin, but we're going to focus on alcoholics and addicts, the ones that cannot stop, regardless of the circumstance, without a power that they don't have. These people, myself included, are in a category of hopeless that no matter what type of human aid we look to, a psychologist, our own power within us to change, to move, our parents, our wife, our kids motivating us, no human aid can help us stay off of this cycle. Because the power that it's going to take, we're blocked off from. And that power is God's power. And there's only one way that we're going to get off this cycle and stay off, and that's with God's help. So if we can't come to this place of understanding there's no other possible way that we're going to be okay, we're going to be well, we're going to get anything out of this life, because once we're drinking and using, we have nothing going for us. We lose everything. We become, in a lot of cases, even homeless. We lose all relationships. We can't hold a job. We can't keep a girl. We have nothing. And so, if that's our true situation, and there's only one way that we're going to have anything good in this life, and that's with God's help and His power on a daily basis of not only connecting with Him, but making ourselves available for others. And there's no other way around this. Then we have to remind ourselves that each and every morning, so we can seek God every day and stay in these three parts and make ourselves available to others. So we can't move forward until we're honest with ourselves that there's no possible way I can do this without God. And I think we got to smash that reservation right now before we move forward, because you remember now we are blocked off from the only power that's going to keep us off this cycle. See, too often we move past this point. And that's why a person thinks that they're just going to stay away from him and her. They're going to move. They got to get out of their job. Their coworkers are bad. They got to get out of that relationship that's bringing them down. You know, they got to get away from family members, whatever the case. And then they're going to be able to stay off the cycle. But the reality of the situation, if you've moved into this place of you're completely hopeless and you are beyond human aid, like the big book talks about, that means that you will only get better and stay off the cycle with God's help. We got to stay right here. We can't move. Where's my water? You missing my water? We can't move. We can't move from this.
Behind you? Is it behind you, man?
It's behind me.
Is it not?
No, that's okay. We cannot move from this because I think sometimes people think they can do this without God. And sometimes it's the last thing we want to consider, opening ourselves up to God. You know? But if this was the only answer and you were convinced of it finally at this place in your life, what would it make you want to do? There's no other way to get off this cycle and to stay off. And if that's the case, thank you. And if that's the case, we'll do what it takes, right? You got to be in this place of desperation. The desperation of a drowning man, where there's no other hope but this path. And the path is beautifully laid out in the big book, in the Bible. And it's a spiritual path. Because we have to treat this internal condition, and only God can treat our inside internal condition. Treat our spirit, because our spirit has a malady because of disconnection of God, from God. So our spirit internally has a malady, which is a sickness, a chronic sickness that gets worse and worse and worse Why? Because we don't have an intimate relationship with God. And nothing is going to fix this malady except an intimate relationship with God. If we can understand this, then we can move forward. The world says we're going to treat this internal condition that only God can treat with other outside things. With a job, with a wife, with a family, with pills, psychologists. And it's not going to work. Only God can treat this spiritual malady. And so if we come to this place in our lives and there's no other answer but God, maybe we can read the chapter, We Agnostic. And it might be able to help people bridge you from not knowing about God or fearing something about God or having a bad experience with God and being closed off to God, which will continue to block you off from the necessary power you need. So if you could turn to me in chapter 4, the big book called We Agnostics, page 44. We'll read a little bit about maybe there's this bridge that can bridge us to the only hope we have. The absolute only hope we have is in God's power. So, let's see where this goes. So, agnostic means that maybe you'll consider that there's probably a God, in this universe, but I definitely don't know him, and I'm not really sure and thinking or knowing if I should believe in him, and it feels weird or this or that. But maybe there might be a God. I never really took the time to seek him and know for sure, but maybe. And then an atheist says there is no God until they're in trouble, of course. Until they're in trouble. And then you'll get a lot of atheists to tell on themselves and admit that they're mad at God. That means God exists. So, very few people are actually atheists. A lot of people are agnostics. So, let's read this chapter. Page 44 out of the big book. We Agnostics. In the preceding chapters, you have learned something of alcoholism. We hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. If when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Okay, let's stop right there. If you have this illness called alcoholism, only a spiritual experience with God will conquer it and overcome it and allow you to stay off this cycle. Only that. You see these words? Only. Now, it says that have we learned something about alcoholism? What is alcoholism? Come on, I want someone to answer that. What is alcoholism or drug addiction? Explain to me what it is. It's a disease. It is. It's a spiritual disease rooted in the mind, and the body plays a part. James, what were you going to say?
Spiritual malady.
It's a spiritual malady. That's the spiritual disease. A malady, spiritual disease that's rooted in the mind, and the body piece is there because this certain type of individual is genetically set up to be allergic to alcohol and drugs. That's why your uncle and your friend can drink those IPAs at the ball game and go to work on Monday. They are not alcoholic addicts. They could be heavy drinkers or just moderate drinkers and users, but they are not alcoholic addicts. That's why our bodies react differently to this stuff. So it's a threefold disease alcoholism is, and this right here, the spiritual malady, the selfish and self-centeredness that we have to treat in those three parts on a daily basis. I never knew that's what alcoholism was. Did I have to admit that I was an alcoholic drug addict? I had to. I had no choice. I didn't want to for a long time, but at a certain point in my walk of life, I had to admit it. Because I was like, oh my gosh, is there any denying it? But then I didn't know what it was to be an alcoholic addict. I didn't know what alcoholism was, drug addiction was. I had no idea it was a spiritual disease, a spiritual malady that's rooted in the mind. And my sick mind tells me that I can control it. Although all my experience tells me otherwise, and I keep going back to this great obsession that I can control it like I see other people controlling, and I can have 1 or 2 beers and be okay. I didn't understand that that's what alcoholism and drug addiction was, and that I can't break off of this and off this cycle without God's help. So how do we keep moving away from, if God's the only way I'm going to get out of this, and I have a death sentence, why is it that we would let up on our approach with God and making ourselves available to others? If you have a death sentence, maybe it's not registering yet. Because if it was registering, guess what you would do? You'd have some desperation. You'd have some desperation to get out of this absolute death sentence that you have, that you've already been living for how many years? Desperation to get better. And then when you do connect with God, you find out how awesome it is. You have to, and you get to. I love that. I have to. And then I remind and I experience that nothing's better. Nothing in this world is better than knowing God and experiencing God, and then knowing that my eternity now is taken care of. And a lot of people don't want to talk about that, right? So we're understanding what alcoholism is. The difference between, as it says, an alcoholic and a non-alcoholic. You could just be someone that parties and drinks a lot. The difference is this threefold disease: the no choice and the no control. When the malady acts up so bad, you are so restless, see the RIDs, restless, irritable, and discontented, being bombarded with thoughts and feelings of uselessness, plagued by depression and anxiety and boredom. Can't seem to have good relationships. No direction. In your head all the time. Right? Don't know which way to go. That's spiritual malady. And that's the problem. And that's what has to get addressed. This is misdiagnosed so much in the world. So many people who can't look to God for the healing that only He can give His creation, look to the world and misdiagnose spirituality all the time with all these different terms. And most of them are just simply misdiagnosed spiritual malady. Disconnection from your Creator. No wonder you're in a bad spot. Full of selfishness in your head, fear, depression, anxiety, right? It's crazy. It's just beautiful to know this. Okay, next paragraph. Paragraph 2. To one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible, right? But to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he is an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. To be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face. Did you hear that? Did you get a glimpse of our insanity and our ignorance and our selfish and pride? That we're faced with this alcoholic doomed death sentence, right? So here we are, we're faced with that. And then our only saving grace is a life lived on spiritual basis and involving God and making ourselves available to others. But we're over here trying to think this one through and weigh the options here. Over here, we have death, certain death and misery, spiritual death and then physical death. Okay, that's all you got over here. You've lived it, you've been on the cycle. Or you can in your own way and own timing, with a little bit of open-mindedness and a little bit of willingness, dare to believe that there is a God who can relieve you from this sickness. And we're over here, death or God. We're going to stop right here for a minute. You're not gonna skate over this. We're going to go over the two options again. Okay, you ready? Your certain death, misery, no relationships, depression, anxiety, feelings of uselessness, a flat out loser, or a little bit of direction and humble and fighting through the pain, looking at God every day, staying in the three parts, looking to your Creator. Here's the three parts, right? We're going to go over it again. We're made up of three parts, right? As it says in Thessalonians, right? The soul, which is the mind, the will, the emotions, the body, and a person's spirit, right? So we need to treat those three parts. And if we do, we'll stay off this cycle for good and for all. So you have a choice. Death or the spiritual path of action. God and staying in the three parts. Because you do have a deadly disease. And you will get sick again if you get out of these three parts. And all the three parts is a relationship with God and making yourself available to others. But you're too selfish to do any of that. Right? So you choose death then. Don't have excuses and point and blame. Oh, there's a blame game in human nature that's just ridiculous. Nobody can take responsibility for their own actions. The world is set up that everybody else is to blame. Don't say that you blame anybody else if you have this opportunity in front of you to choose death or to choose life. Right? So the three parts. How do we treat our mind? Here's how you treat your mind. You actually work the steps. Work through the steps. Let go of resentment. Find out you're the problem. Get connected with God. It's through your Bible and the daily renewing your mind with the Bible. It's through that incense where you're praying to God. You have a prayer life each and every morning. You spend time worshiping God each and every day. You understand how you treat your mind. You live out the steps in your life. Prayer, meditation every morning, working with others, right? The steps are living. You remind yourself about step one. You are powerless from going back on this cycle and ruining everything if you let up on these three steps. So you treat your mind in that way. Is that clear? Right? Now, the body piece. How are you going to treat your body? Exercise is good. Don't leave that out. Exercise is real good. But you bring your physical body around like-minded people 3-4 times a week. Who does that? Unless you're in treatment. Who does that? You're so busy with your life and the world. I don't got time for that. Well, you're going to be back on the cycle, and you're going to have nothing. So you better make time. Okay? This is something that will not fail. 100% guaranteed. So the body piece is what? You take your physical body to 3 or 4 meetings, whether it's life group, church, a really good literature-based AA meeting, right? You find a sponsor, you work the steps, you're hearing stuff, learning from each other. Okay? Now the spirit piece, the third piece is what? After you've gone through the steps, after you've been discipled in the church, you make yourself available to others. You'll be able to, God will put someone in your path that you can relate to, they'll relate to you. Some won't. You'll try and they'll go do their own thing. Don't feel discouraged. You're doing your part. At the same time, you're trying to help them. Guess who you're helping the most? Yourself. When you're helping others, whether or not they want to stick with it and follow through the steps and whatnot, you're actually helping yourself. You get that? So make yourself available to others is the best way to treat your spirit. And if you do those 3 things on a daily basis, it's impossible to go back on this cycle. Ding, ding, ding. You just solved drug addiction, alcoholism. It's been solved. There is no problem with drug addiction and alcoholism. It's 100% wiped out and solved, but you're the one who's choosing death. You're the one who thinks you're uniquely different, and you don't have to follow through with the necessary steps that will 100% guarantee that you never relapse and go back to your old ways. So it falls on the individual. Because alcoholism and drug addiction has been solved. There is no more problem with alcoholism and drug addiction. There's no problem if you adhere to the directions and the suggestions laid out. And you involve God, who's the only one who can treat your internal condition, the spiritual malady, which you want to call, well, I'm plagued with depression and anxiety and feelings of uselessness and no direction in life, and fear and shame and guilt. Yeah, I know you are, because you're selfish and self-centered and you're living according to the world's lies. No wonder you're plagued with all these spiritual symptoms of disease. But God will clear that up for you. It'll come back. You'll feel depressed days and a little anxious over here. But you got to quickly recognize it and cast it onto God and give Him your focus and pray those things away and put them to death with the power of the cross and the Holy Spirit. Come on now. What about you? Oh, what about this? What about this? When you're feeling like that, why don't you get your self-centered butt off out of your head and go work with somebody? When you're feeling like that, overwhelmed and it's anxious, why don't you go work with somebody and watch that feeling disappear? But you're not doing that, are you? Oh no, you've never done that. You've never done it. And if you're not careful, you won't do it now either. And then, I don't know why I keep relapsing. Man. What? What do you mean you don't know why? Maybe you didn't know why before, but you ain't gonna get that opportunity now. You don't have an excuse now. Stay here and watch us beat it into you. Boom, 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 boom. Excuse over. You don't have that excuse no more. You chose death. There's things that happen that continually ignite my fire for this stuff. Things that happen around me that are evil and just people flipping with their self-centeredness. And my fire never goes out. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm in the 3 parts. And God's at the center of all that, those 3 parts. Don't let your fire go out. It matters. What time we got? 5 minutes? I don't care how many times I ask this guy. 5 minutes. That's a 5-minute man over there. Yes! All right, here we go. 5 more minutes. Let's continue reading. What are we at? But it isn't so difficult, right? Chapter 44. Why can we never get past 2 paragraphs in this? Why? Hey, I want to know why. You guys are like, because of you. Duh. Okay, ready? But it isn't so difficult. You ready to go? Page 44. About half our original fellowship were of exactly that type. At first, some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope we were not true alcoholics. But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life, or else. Perhaps it is going to be that way with you. But cheer up. Something like half of us thought we were atheists or agnostics. Our experience shows that you need not be disconcerted. It's okay when you come in questioning, is God really going to do this for me? I remember, I've told this many times, I'll say it again. I'm raising my hand in treatment. Are you meaning to tell me that this is 100% guaranteed that this God you talk about is going to somehow do for me what I can't do for myself? Yep. 100. Do you know what 100 means? honestly, do you understand what 100% guarantee means? Do you get it? In this world, there's not a lot guaranteed, right? It's up and down, it's craziness. This right here is 100% guaranteed, no way around it, that you will never relapse if you follow direction. And you don't need to have all this faith right away. It takes a lifetime to know God. Are you open to have a daily approach to be available every day to get to know Him? Are you just open and willing? Because your other alternative is death. And that's why drugs and alcohol is such a great persuader for our ignorant, selfish selves to start to open up to our Creator finally and find everything we've been looking for. All the answers we've been looking for this whole time. And drugs and alcohol become that great persuader for knuckleheads like me that we're going to turn everywhere else but God. It's beautiful. So, don't be alarmed if you don't catch fire overnight. You know? Faith will build. You seek God every day. You make yourself available even when you don't feel like it. God is greater than our feelings. And you will have a power that comes in and through you and works through you. And Ephesians 3:20 will be your story. So one of you a quote. Ephesians 3:20, please.
Now to Him who is able to do immeasurably more than what you could ask or imagine.
And how does He do that?
In Christ.
According to the Spirit which is at work within us.
According to the Spirit that is at work within us, which is being in Christ. Okay? So God can do immeasurably more. Like I was told that day, He can do for me what I couldn't do for myself. I need His power to come and work in and through me. And God, through His power that's working through me, can do immeasurably more. Now I'm walking on this different path, this spiritual path. And I have fulfillment and peace. And I go through things still. My flesh tries to come out. My selfishness is there. I still got pride. But I lay that on a daily basis to God. I make myself available to others. And I have a power now that's working in and through me. See, when before I was blocked off from that power because of my own selfish outlook, my unwillingness to take direction and listen, keep choosing death. I kept choosing death. And then I decided after one of these emergent remorsefuls and the firm resolution I made this last time did not turn into a broken promise. I decided to take direction and listen and have a daily approach. And they told me it would work 100%. And guess what? It does. So that's we agnostics out of the big book. There is a way to guarantee that you will never relapse. Don't tell the treatment centers because they're going to go out of business. Don't tell them. Don't tell them. They need job security. Okay? We'll be right back at this next week. All right? God bless you.